Hi, I'm Sari Sudhakaran. Jaws probably has the most famous axial cut ever. Chief Brody anxiously watches, powerless. There are three shots in this series. Each one gets closer and closer as a passerby crosses the frame. Notice a few things. Brody sits in the exact same spot relative to the camera frame. He doesn't change position. More importantly, the camera hardly ever changes. It's almost as if you could crop the first image. Here's a shot of that, and if you put it right next to the succeeding shot, they're near identical. And so with the third. The camera doesn't change its axis. If you're filming with a 35mm lens, say, all you do is zoom in and continue filming. The camera doesn't go higher or lower, or to the side. In other words, the camera stays on its axis, hence the name axial cut. A lot of shots called axial cuts are anything but. Here's an example from Akira. The cut is not an axial cut because the camera axis has changed. The camera is lower in the second shot. Notice the relationship between the head and the frames in the background. It has changed. In an axial cut, it must feel like you cropped the first image to get the second. If this isn't the case, the cut can no longer be called an axial cut. Axial means that which relates to or has the characteristics of an axis, which is a line drawn from camera to subject in relation to the ground. If that changes, the cut is no longer an axial cut by definition. It's in the name. An axial cut ignores one of the oldest conventions in film, that two shots must be separated by an angle of at least 30 degrees or you get a jump cut, which takes the audience out of the action because it draws attention to itself. This convention came about with the assumption that cuts must not draw attention to themselves. Each succeeding shot must flow seamlessly. So, is an axial cut a jump cut? If one goes strictly by the conventions laid out in the classical Hollywood system, then yes, an axial cut is technically a jump cut. However, if you define a jump cut as any cut that distracts the audience, then the answer is it depends. Depends on who? On you, the audience. The axial cuts in Jaws did not and do not distract most people watching the film. There is no jolt. In fact, I would argue the reverse, that people identified with Brody's angst more as we got closer. Let's say 99% of those watching the scene didn't notice the axial cut. To them, it's not a jump cut. For the 10% that noticed it, it is a jump cut. It all depends on how one uses an axial cut. It has to be used with taste and finesse, or it probably won't work. Akira Kurosawa is one of the great masters of the axial cut. He used it consistently in many films. Here's a shot in Ran. The camera position might have changed a bit, but the shot sizes are so different it's impossible to tell by how far. You could call this an axial cut. In this example, the axial cut is similar to the one used in Jaws. Now let's take a cool example from Akira where the axial cut was supposed to draw attention to itself. Here, the hat gets special attention with an axial cut to highlight the beginning of a new day in the rest of Watanabe's life. A mundane little object takes on an importance well beyond its price, because the little things are priceless in his life now. One last example from Run, also an axial cut that appears seamless. It's quite probable these shots were from the second telephoto camera operator, but it's so hard to tell because there is no background to compare the change in position. He knew exactly what he was doing when he used axial cuts. What are some of the advantages of an axial cut? 1. It avoids the time a zoom takes. A zoom movement takes screen time, even at its quickest speed. There is also the psychological aspect of moving in or out, and our attention is drawn to the movement. An axial cut avoids the screen time taken to zoom in or out. This gives us a sense of reaching the next shot quickly, hence propelling the action forward faster. It makes a big impact in the pacing of the scene. Number 2, an axial cut can highlight something important. An axial cut to a close-up highlights what the director wants the audience to see, as if drawing special attention to it. Number 3, deliver impact. Axial cuts are a great way to deliver an impactful shot. The close-up of the hat from Akira draws attention to the hat while also delivering a surprise or shock due to the severity of the cut. The close-up is too tight, and the large difference between the wide shot and the close-up is the cause of this shock or impact. Sergio Leone also uses this to great effect, as we shall see. What are some disadvantages of an axial cut? 1. It can become an unintentional jump cut. When done incorrectly, an axial cut becomes a jump cut and draws unnecessary attention to itself. For this reason, axial cuts must be used with care and precision. In the example from Jaws, in the same scene later, Spielberg uses a dolly zoom shot. He had a dolly and the crew available on location, yet chose to go for the axial cut. Number 2, it can feel unmotivated or two-dimensional. A second shot just zoomed in or out might not present enough additional information or impact to warrant its existence. When this happens, the shot can feel unmotivated, even redundant. An axial cut also feels two-dimensional when this happens. By using a zoom lens and zooming in or out, you are taking the audience along the journey through the duration of the movement. With an axial cut, the shot can just feel cropped, without energy. How do you hide an axial cut? You can hide an axial cut using 2 techniques. The first, you add motion in both shots, and number 2, you hide the background in the close-up. A great example of both techniques being used simultaneously is the final battle from Once Upon a Time in the West. The camera pans, so the actor has supposedly moved a little in the second shot. Secondly, the background in the close-up is blurred. This further reduces the impact of the axial cut, thereby making it harder to discern. However, Leone loves extremes, so you're unlikely to miss the impact of witnessing a tight close-up from a wide shot in one instant. So, to answer our question, why hasn't Spielberg used the axial cut again? Probably because he hasn't found a situation where he could make good use of it. Ultimately, axial cuts are a matter of style. It's a way of presenting shots while also delivering an impact. It should not be used often or randomly. Axial cuts walk a fine line, like this example from Die Hard. Is the third shot warranted? Or the second? Or both? You decide. Draw an axial line to all of your friends in the film business, and if you like this video, please share it with them. We'll call it Axial Love.